do say, so thank you all for being here. Again, if you please mute your end, that'll be helpful. And we'll have questions being received throughout the chat, please. I want to show you this fun graphic that we have from our day at the Capitol. This is where kind of what the synopsis of it was. Hopefully you can see all that without that thing. Go up, there we go. So on February 26th, we took about 20 people down to the Capitol and did some advocacy. And we saw all of our Boulder County legislators. We saw the Secretary of State at lunch and the Attorney General at lunch. And it was just really inspiring. And so I want to thank all of you who did make it and make sure you come next year. So I'll stop sharing that. I want to address the Zoom issue. The reason why we have Zooms in the winter is threefold. One is to, sorry, I'm getting distracted there, to counteract inclement weather. We never know when that's going to happen. Also, it's a very time where lots of people are getting flu and COVID, et cetera. And so instead of being around each other, we do that. But the main reason is so we can have people like David Hogg come speak to us from a national level. So I hope that you guys are appreciative that we will be getting back in person next month in April at the Avalon. And I want to say shout out to Ben Cowan, who is our Boulder County Democratic Party Chair, Kathy Gebhardt, who's our State Board of Education representative or board member, Lynn Geisinger, who's on RTD, and former Rep Casey Becker. So welcome to you all. Just want to remind you to please consider renewing your membership because all of us together makes us a better, stronger force. And your first $50 goes through, it goes to our small donor committee, which
and what I did was I moved the audio setting to here.
Okay, please mute whoever that is. Anyway, so please consider renewing. The first $50 goes to our small donor community, which is what we use to contribute to races and our party. And then anything else after that goes to keeping our operations moving along. And let's get to where we are, why we're here rather. So I'll introduce David Hogg, who is the Vice Chair of the Democratic National Committee. And he is the youngest Vice Chair to ever serve. So congratulations on your election, David. I actually encouraged people and wrote to my DNC representatives to select you. So at least they listened on that one. So congratulations. And thank you again for being here. And then we also have Shad Murib, who is our Colorado Democratic State Party Chair. So let's go ahead and have him up on the screen too, please, Wei. And if you guys would like to introduce yourself and maybe like in the way of saying how and why you chose to run for the positions that you're in, I think that'd be a great start. David, you can go first.
All right. Figure you guys would know your chair. Yeah, so my name's David Hogg. I am one of the newly elected vice chairs of the DNC. There are several of us. There is not just one, to be clear. And I decided to run for this role because I saw an opportunity for me to be the change that I wanted to see.
You still can't hear.
And that opportunity came when I was at a executive committee meeting as a member of the public watching the DNC, how it functioned. And it was their first meeting after the election. And the first thing that they talked about when it came to why we lost was 18 to 29-year-old voters. And I looked around the room and I didn't see anybody that looked like me. There was nobody that was under 40 at all. And it's one thing to talk about, you know, a group of voters and have them in the room. It's another thing to talk about them and not have them in the room or at the table. So I threw my hat in the ring, wanting to run in this race to talk about how are we going to win back our young voters? Because we had about a 20-point shift to the right of 18 and 29-year-old voters this cycle. There's in fact some evidence now that we may have even lost them to Donald Trump by a small margin. That is deeply concerning for the future of our party and the future of our country. And I wanted to be part of that change. So I threw my hat in the ring and ended up running. Spent many, many hours on the phone with people like your members out in Colorado, and your chair and others, and just ran talking about the necessity of our party addressing the issues that we have with younger voters and making sure that we're addressing the issues that matter to them, whether that be obviously gun violence, but also the cost of living. Rents have soared astronomically across the country since COVID, and our generation has bifurcated. The biggest predictor of who went the most to the right of Gen Z was whether or not you were in high school during COVID. The segment of my generation that went through high school during COVID went about 20 points to the right compared to the last election cycle for president. And that's 18 to 24-year-olds. 25 to 29-year-olds only went 4 points to the right compared to the 2020 election. So we need somebody there that understands that Gen Z is not a monolith, and also understands Gen Z because he is a member of Gen Z. So that's why I ran for this role, and I'm happy to be elected and happy to get to work. I've been going all around the country. I've been in Wisconsin. I've been in New Hampshire. I've been in Florida's first congressional district. I'll be in the 6th congressional very soon. Just going all over the country to help support our special elections that are coming up, and the Wisconsin Supreme Court race and everything else like that around the country. And I'm very, very happy to be with you all. Happy to see that Colorado is one of the few points on the map that shifted to the left this election cycle, and that's a testament to your work. And we got to keep it that way. People like to say that Colorado is a blue state now. You guys are not necessarily. You got the Rocky Mountain gun owners. You have all kinds of crazy right-wing extremist groups out there. And you've fought them and you've won, but every election is a new battle, and we can't stop fighting until we've won the war.
Great, thank you, David. And you're right, we've got a share of crazy. So, Shad, congrats on what you were able to do for us, and go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much. And first, let me just say thanks to David. We're really grateful to have you here with us, and you're an inspiring voice for the party. And we made a wise choice as a body electing you as vice chair. And so really grateful that you're here with us here today. For those people who don't know me, I'm Shad Murib. I'm the chair of the Colorado Democratic Party. I was really grateful to be reelected just about a week ago to this job. It is the privilege of my life, and really soberly excited about the fight that we have, because I think, as David said, Colorado is what pundits called a blue island in a red wave. And just to give you a little example of what you were all able to accomplish over the past couple of years, we had 43,000 new Democratic voters from rural areas turn out in Colorado last year. We had a 15% increase in voter turnout in our key districts that we organize deep canvassing year-round organizing programs around. And of the 301 counties that moved towards Democrats in the country, 30 of them were from Colorado, and that's the most of any state. And so that's a testament to our ability to organize and organize everywhere. We did this through things that were unusual and different. Like we cut grants to counties called the Colorado County Comeback, where we delivered thousands of dollars to rural and red places alike to make sure that they could build long-term infrastructure that'll hopefully have a positive impact for years to come. And I think David alluded to this. Despite all this success, we are a party in crisis, and we are one election away from being a red state. I think many of us remember how frustrated we were at Cory Gardner being able to knock Mark Udall out of the Senate in 2014, and we're always at risk of something like that happening again. So we certainly don't rest on our laurels. We are certainly not just sitting back and hoping for success. We need to double down on our commitment to working people. We need to be unafraid to shelve what didn't work, double down on new methods, and really communicate and be everywhere. Everything from redesigning our platform to be simpler and more concise, to changing the way we organize on phone screens and at the doors is going to be critical to make sure that we can take on Trump and win. And, we are the spear tip of the path to a Democratic House with Colorado's 8th. We also have Colorado's 5th, which is too often overlooked down in Colorado Springs, but is also moving left. Then, of course, we're always fighting in CD3 and CD4. You never know when Lauren Boebert's going to implode. So we have many, many story, and keep up as the spirit tip of a blue America. So we're excited to be in this fight with you, and excited to talk about exactly how we do that. Thanks everyone for joining us here today.
Thank you, Shad. I think you mentioned all the different ways that we need to get our media out. And I think I'd like this question to probably go to both of you. David, you can be more general, national level, and Shad, you can address Colorado. They're likely both similar, but what do you think that our message should be? And then how do we get that out not just as a party, but as like us as individual messengers. That's what I like to tell people is they get frustrated that nobody hears the Democratic message. And I remind people, I'm like, well, you're a messenger too. So how can we get people to be comfortable being a messenger, and what should that message be? David, do you want to take it first? Oh, Wei, can you here? Let's see. Try it now.
I've been censored. No. Look, I think it comes down to honesty, folks. It's really not that complicated. I've had a lot of really good conversations with Adam Frisch about some of the things that he was talking about in his run for vice chair and the work that he did to outperform by so much against Lauren Boebert. In those conversations with him, I think one of the things that we both agree on is that it comes back to honesty and just talking about the issues that really matter to people. In particular, I think about this past election when people ask me why we lost, I would give them a straight answer, which is that we heard two things from voters mainly this cycle, which was that prices were too high and Joe Biden was too old. And unfortunately, we spent $2 billion saying, no, he's not. And then effectively, yes, he is. And then, no, they aren't in regards to the prices being too high. That's not an effective message, right? I kind of feel like we almost closed our eyes this past election cycle and just prayed if we put enough money into ads that it would somehow change reality of what people were facing when they were really struggling. And I think that acknowledging that reality isn't a weakness. It's an important strength because people are living it. It's just a matter of how do you deal with it in the first place. That's just what they want to hear. And that's part of what, in my role, I want to do with young people in particular, to gain back their trust. The fact of the matter is, a lot of people right now don't trust Democrats, unfortunately, in terms of governing. They don't. The polling shows us that. And I want to just start out by acknowledging that reality and talking about what we got to do to make it better. And it's not by just saying, going out there and vote for Democrats. That message isn't going to work. It's showing them why they should vote for us, right? Showing them the work that we're doing to make housing more affordable by building more housing. It's showing them the work that we're doing to combat the issue, how we're fighting abortion bans, for example, how we're fighting to lower healthcare costs, how we're fighting to protect veterans like my father was, who are disabled and are living day to day with support from the VA while it is under assault from people like Donald Trump. It's talking to the environmental scientists that I met in Florida's first congressional district who've worked at the EPA for over a decade and a half and got laid off by Donald Trump because their job had the title environmental justice in it, when what they were doing was helping to mitigate people's exposure to things like lead from their pipes and asbestos, uh, giving them an opportunity with our party to become part of it and also to help them run for office, I think is really important. And just being really good, not just good at governing. I think President Biden was very good at that because of his decades of experience, right? We look throughout American history, and many of our most successful Democratic presidents tend to have started before they were 30 years old. And it makes sense. If you've worked in something for decades, it turns out you know how to get things done and play the game. And President Biden was really good at getting things done. Unfortunately, we were not very good as a party at talking about what he was actually getting done. The fact of the matter is, just as one example, and then I'll shut up, on guns alone, we got the first federal gun law passed in 30 years. Unlike Republicans, we didn't just talk about putting money, we didn't just talk about needing to fund more mental health care and then go behind the scenes and actually cut funding for it, as they so often do. We actually put billions of dollars into mental health programs to help our young people in their schools and hire tens of thousands of school guidance counselors and mental health counselors in schools around the country. And we created the first ever Office of Gun Violence Prevention to coordinate the federal government's response, right? You want to talk about efficiency? Our government allocated billions of dollars after Uvalde to ensure that we were able to combat gun violence as much as possible. But there was no single person whose job it was in the federal government to coordinate the implementation of that bill and that allocation of billions of dollars. So what we did is we hired 3 people at the White House, 2 deputy directors of gun violence prevention and 1 assistant. And they made sure that states around the country knew that there were millions of dollars available for them for free that didn't require them raising their own taxes to enforce their own gun laws better. And the result was remarkable. We saw in the past 2 years the two largest single year reductions in gun homicides in American history. In 2023, it was 12%, and in 2024 is around 14%. That is a remarkable decline compared to the 30 or so percent increase that we saw under President Trump's administration in just 2 years. So we are really damn good at governing in many senses, but we are not able to talk well enough about what we're doing because the voters that decided this election get their information not from Fox News, but from TikTok. They are low information voters that are not reading the New York Times. They're not watching cable news. They're not watching the nightly news. They are looking at their phones and they are looking at TikTok. And we have to develop a much stronger presence on there with our elected officials to talk about what they are actually doing to advance and address the issues that our voters care about to rebuild that trust and not say, oh, we're just Democrats. We're great. Just show them why they're great by delivering.
Well
I want to
said,
agree
David.
with a lot of what David just said there, and also just say that there's a couple of statistics and a fact that I always love sharing with people because I think it speaks to the issues that we've had communicating our message. First, the Colorado Democratic Party platform is 52 pages of 11-point font size bullet points. And while there are many, many great ideas in the platform, that makes it really tough for people to print out, read. Our candidates are not taking the platform word for word because there's every idea in there, which means there's nothing clear and concise for our party to stand for. And a platform in and of itself is not any more useful than anyone else's individual opinion, except that it should be able to clearly articulate our values, and it should be a good tool for us to be able to recruit great candidates, craft great legislation, and build a strong message from. And so I think that we need to have a dramatic redesign of our platform to be clear, concise, and succinct. There are also two numbers that scare the heck out of me, and I assume they're going to scare the heck out of you. This is the first election in modern American history where Democrats lost people making under $50,000. That is a striking change from 2008. And if you look at the coalition that Donald Trump won with in 2024, it most looks like Barack Obama's coalition from 2008. And the second number that scares the heck out of me is that across our entire coalition, when they're polled and when they engage in focus groups, almost everyone to a T says, quote, the Democratic Party cares about other people, not people like me. And so I think we need to get better at telling stories. I think we need to get better at amplifying people's issues that are facing their everyday lives. And I don't know about you guys, but you go to a coffee shop, you go to a dive bar, and you talk to the person, who's either trying to wake up for the morning or cool off from a day at work. They're talking about their bills. They're talking about making sure they can get their kid a PlayStation at Christmas. They're talking about being able to take their partner on a vacation and not being able to do it. They're mad at their bosses. They're mad at big corporations. They're mad at their landlord. And Democrats need to speak to this real frustration. I think that there's a tendency for us to try to build a big tent in a way that lets everybody know we're looking out for them, whether you are a landlord or a renter or a big corporation or a small business. I think that we really need to take a look at the vast majority of this country, which is struggling to get by, pay their bills, and get ahead, and speak directly to the issues facing them. And a progressive message does work with them. They know that the Democratic Party is best suited to help them get a bigger paycheck and grow their retirement accounts. We just have to be able to articulate that contrast with the Republicans without trying to make everybody feel like there's no sense in being offended. I have no problem offending a slumlord, a big corporation, someone who wants to rip our public lands away. These politicians in DC who are trying to give tax cuts to billionaires by slashing Medicaid. These are people who need to be called out aggressively, and I don't think that we should shy away from that. And that will help us build a platform that is really focused on working people and the issues facing them day to day. And the final thing I'll point out there is you are all familiar with Megan Lukens, our amazing state rep who moved over to the high country. But Megan does a really wonderful job at this. When she's talking about climate change out west, she's talking about drought and changing animal patterns for hunters. She's not talking about air pollution or water quality, even though that's just as important as anything else. But she's really speaking to the cultural issues facing Republicans, Democrats, and unaffiliated in her district and not compromising her values in the slightest while doing it.
Right, and you have to know your audience, right? And know your district. And just because one person's talking like that, like if she's talking to her district, but somebody in Boulder County might not be talking in that same manner, but we're still heading towards the same goal. I think we have to have the freedom, and maybe this is part of our problem, but right, the freedom to be able to talk to your district specifically, and yet we're still trying to have this singular message that's bite size rather than paragraph size. So I think that's a great point. There's many questions in the chat, and one that I want to bring up that you kind of, I think, touched on, David, when you said that we need to have people that are fighting and show people that this is what the Democrats are willing to do. And last Friday was, in my opinion, a horrendous failure of our leadership to not have that messaging out either correctly the first time, and let people know, okay, look, we are in a terrible position. We have no power, but this is what we're going to do. And instead, what happened is we kind of played flip-flop, and then, he went against what we thought he was going to do. And, that fights against us with how we're trying to show Dems that we actually will do work for you. Do you have an opinion on how we can better work around that and what we can show? Like you did a good point on pointing out all the great governance. Most people don't know that, unfortunately. And so what do you say beyond telling them how we've governed in the past? How do we show them that we will go out and work for them as a party? Can you guys let them hear? Okay. Try it now. I'll take it over.
I think it's a tonal thing. I think we got to stop. The Republican Party of 20 years ago is not coming back. The Republican Party pre Newt Gingrich killed the old Republican Party, and it is not coming back. Donald Trump was the final nail in that coffin. And we have to realize what we are dealing with here are people that are only going to respond to one thing, and that is force and sheer anger, and hitting them where it hurts and taking votes away from them, right? And making sure that our base knows that we are fighting for them, that we care, that we give a damn. And I think that look, there is a very robust debate going on right now in our party about that vote, as you know. What I will say is that inside of Washington, we have to fight a hell of a lot harder. And that goes for so many votes that are going on. We need to be giving fiery speeches on the ground. In my opinion, what I wish we were doing, what I've mentioned to different members of Congress myself, and this is difficult, right? Because I am not a member of Congress. I'm not, in leadership, obviously. But what I wish that we were able to do more of is a kind of shadow government, or more, a shadow cabinet to respond immediately. Politics is theater, right? We treat this like it's C-SPAN, and they're treating it like it's WrestleMania. It's literally, in some senses, right?
Yep.
We need to show people how we're out there responding to what they're doing, and understand, yes, constitutional norms, very important. Parliamentary procedure, very important. That messaging should never leave the halls of Congress, ever, ever. It needs to stay in Congress, and if it leaves, die at the front door and not ever get out. Like, that type of messaging is not going to move people. What we need to be talking about is what we're doing at every level of our government, not just to say like, oh, we're just the party of being anti-Donald Trump, but we're the party of the pro 99%. We're the party of the people. We're here to deliver for them. And we heard from them that their prices are too high. So guess what? We're listening, and we're changing. We're building more housing. We're going out there and addressing the cost of living, and also showing that when Republicans talk about this a lot of the time, because right now, for whatever reason, I could talk for hours about this, for whatever reason, they're trusted more on the economy. They're trusted more on inflation. They're trusted more on all these other things, even though the data shows us otherwise over and over and over again, whether that's stock market returns under Democratic presidents, whether that is the employment rate under it is confounding to me that every piece of reality points to the fact that life for Americans is better under Democratic leadership in almost every circumstance, except the cost of housing in many of our very blue states. Because I could go on and on about that, and there's a whole other robust debate happening about that. but we've got to show people that we're fighting out there, and we got to show up in their communities. I wish that we were having town halls, not just in the districts where Republicans are not willing to meet with their constituents. I wish we were having town halls. I wish we picked a day, a couple months from now when everybody's on recess and said, all right, this is the day that everybody, every Democrat and every Republican, we're going to challenge the Republican Party to have a town hall on this day in their community. And when they do not show up, you know who will? The Democrats. We're going to show up. Our parties are going to show up. Our local party is going to show up. We're going to register voters. And you know what else we're going to bring? We're going to bring an empty chair to replace that member of Congress. And you know who we're going to put in that chair? The Democrat who's going to replace them. That's what I think we need to be focused on. And I think right now, to be honest with you guys, there's a bit of a disconnect between some of the leadership of the party a little bit, in particular in Congress, in that they're thinking about, well, like, what is most effective that we can do inside of here in these parliamentary procedures and all these other things. That's very important. I want them to focus on that. But there's a disconnect between that and the base of the party. People feel really alone right now. They feel isolated and they feel scared. It is incumbent on our party to bring people together, to be a party, right? To not just let people be isolated and scared in their communities. That is how fascism operates. That is how authoritarians operate, because they know that they can't take all of us on at the same time. So they need to make us believe that we're all divided and that they could come after any single one of us. But the reality is, if we're united against them, we can defeat them. What we need to do, though, is tap into some of the theatrics of politics, because the base wants to do anything at all. And right now, some of the I think to some extent, closer towards the top of the party, we're like, well, we have to wait until the midterms. We have to wait until this and that. And that. It's like, no, people just want to do things. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do in this role as the vice chair, is communicate. Yes, we should be going out there and doing these town halls. I think what Bernie and AOC are doing is phenomenal. And we need to be doing a hell of a lot more of it. We also see Governor Tim Walz out there taking accountability for the $2 billion that was spent on an election that we lost because of 230,000 voters across 3 states, in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, right? Let me be clear about that, by the way. That is not a mandate. Anybody who says that must have the math skills of Donald Trump, who bankrupted a casino, mind you. That is not a mandate. Anybody who says that is just bullshit, ultimately. And that is really what I think that we need to be doing this moment, is rallying our base by making sure that they aren't feeling alone, by giving them something to do to help hold these Republicans accountable, like a town hall, but also focusing too on our organizing structure in a party, right? I personally, if it was up to me, I wouldn't want somebody to walk more than 15 minutes to organize people for the Democratic Party from their front door, unless they're in a rural area, to be clear. Some of you are in rural Colorado. That's a little tough, but maybe for you, it's an hour and a half. I don't know. But in most of our cities, for example, I don't want somebody to go more than 15 minutes away to help organize their community. And I want the same person talking to the same voters multiple times over the course of the next 2 years to know what their dog's name is, to know what who their kids are, if they're on Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, VA benefits, SNAP, whatever it is, and talk to them about what they need so we can communicate that up the party to our leaders and show them that we are responding to them and that we care about them. And we're not just showing up from somebody being 1,000 miles away from out of state right before an election, who's probably the third different face that you've seen that also isn't from your state, but it's somebody from your own community that knows what goes on, knows what the issues are, and ultimately cares about you, and is here to be with you before the election and after.
Yeah, thank you for that, David. I think that's a perfect segue for you, Shad, to go into, you mentioned earlier CD8 and CD5. I know that we did a lot last year in CD8 and just missed, but do you have new plans for how that's going to work for the 26th election, but starting now, hopefully?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think David's passion around organizing in your immediate area is exactly the right answer to this, and something that we learned quite a bit from our programs last year. So you heard me talk about the Colorado County Comeback. We invested very few strings attached dollars directly into counties and candidates to run program that works for them. In some rural areas, they used it to buy a laptop and give volunteers in all corners of a large county cell phones that they could dial from, because cell service is hard to come by and it's hard to afford in some of these areas. That's an example of how a rural county used it. Some of the more metropolitan counties used it to print lint for their lit drops or their canvases. Others used it to pay for a month of office rent. I'm planning to fundraise as aggressively as possible to be able to do that, not just in 2025 for our city council and school board races, but also next year again. We also launched a project called the Horizon Project last year, which took a look at voters who sat out in 2022 that could have made a dramatic difference. David mentioned Adam Frisch. 13,000 people who used to be regular voters and voted for Democrats sat out 2022. Lord Boebert won by 546 votes. About 14,000 sat out CD8 in 2022. Yadira had only won by 1,600. And then she lost last year by the tightest battleground margin in the entire country. And so David's exactly right. This was no mandate for Republican Congress to do what they're doing. This was a red wave creeping over the sandbags we piled up. I think the answer is exactly right about going local. The way that I can best scale up a program like that and save everyone the headache of having to see more of our fundraising emails is to fix a fundamental problem in our organizing structure that every chair has said they're going to fix, and I want this team to be the one to actually do it, which is we have about 3,400 precincts in the state. Every precinct by law can have 2 precinct organizers. And so we could have this giant army of Democrats, unaffiliated, Republicans who are joining our party because they're frustrated, immediately organizing their neighborhoods. We only have 1,600 precinct organizers. We are falling dramatically behind in building the type of neighbor by neighbor support that we should have. And I think we used to sit around and give people packets of 100 doors and say, go knock on as many as you can. And if you come back with 25, have a quick conversation, confirm their vote for a Dem, and we're good to go. What we've learned is that we need to have much more deep and meaningful conversations with voters about their hopes and dreams long before we ever ask them for a vote. And so our plan, and I'd invite anybody here to join us in this when CDP launches it, is we're going to be launching a precinct organizer growth program. We'll brand it to have a much sexier name than that. But the idea is going to be bite-sized pieces of work people can do every day and each week that doesn't get in the way of their lives because people are busy, that helps them move the needle in ways that we can scale up and measure. And so that's something that we're hoping to inspire some action through because people really are busy. They have multiple jobs, they've got school, they've got family members they're taking care of or kids. And so the ability for somebody to make 3 phone calls, knowing that 3,000 other people are going to make 3 phone calls, 9,000 calls a week in Colorado could make a dramatic difference in our electoral outcomes. And so those are the types of things that we're looking at to sort of translate our organizing into a more digital age and a time when people are busier than ever.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm excited to hear more about the precinct organizer launch. I think that's a fabulous idea, and hits right on David's point also about neighbor to neighbor, not stranger to neighbor, etc. Wonderful. So still lots of comments about messaging, and we had last month, David, we had Rachel Bidicoffer on, and we talked about her book, Hit 'Em Where It Hurts. And it's she's a messenger, right? And she is good at marketing and can do all of that. And hers was keep it simple, like Trump is stealing your money, where the GOP is taking away your health, wealth, and safety. Linking Trump and Musk together because Musk is going way down. But if we don't link him to Trump, then it's not going to impact him. So what do you guys think about narrowing that message so that it's simplified for, like I said, people on this call to move forward, yet not rattle the big base, not cause disruption? Like we've got some legislation issues right now going on that's splitting the Dems. And so do you guys have a way to simplify that, or what do you recommend? There we go. Okay. I apologize, David. I don't know why it's doing that.
On how to simplify our messaging?
Yeah, I mean, like, what do you have? Like, would you have one that you would just say that's the bumper sticker version versus our paragraphs that we like to talk in because we're policy oriented? And if not, it's okay. I mean, that's our kind of our thing, right? And it's so.
Honestly, I really think a lot of it just comes down to the fact that we just need to be way better at advertising what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Like around the country, and that's difficult because it's also frankly on our electeds to like do a better job of that in reaching people where they're at on social media like TikTok and Instagram and these other platforms that are owned by predominantly a bunch of right wingers, unfortunately, which makes our jobs even harder. We also have to deal with the fact, to be honest with you folks, the odds are stacked against Democrats just from a structural standpoint in this country. Liberal parties in non-proportional systems of government, specifically like we have with the Senate, and the fact that our states on average are significantly more conservative just because of how they were, the long history of our country and a whole bunch of other things. The odds are stacked against us. We're always going to have a much harder time gaining power in this country than Republicans are going to have, especially with the gerrymandering they're able to do in states around the country because of that advantage. What I think we have to do, though, is show people how we are delivering, specifically around the cost of, I know I'm not shutting up about the cost of housing. I really, really think that is like the most important thing that we focus on for the next 4 years, probably decade, to be honest with you. We have done such a poor job of addressing the cost of living in many of our very blue states, not Colorado necessarily, although I'm sure there's always work to do.
Yes.
That we're losing, the blue wall is not going to exist after 2030. It's not. It's not going to be enough, even if we won all those states. And we're looking at a real scenario where Texas gains 4 congressional seats. That means 4 more electoral votes. And then Florida as well is going to gain that many. And we got a real problem on our hands. We have to figure out how to address this cost of living crisis because, frankly, Democrats have gotten so good at building the economy in our states, we've become the victims of our own success, right? California has a GDP that consistently outpaces the growth of the US's own GDP on average, pretty significantly outpacing it. The problem is we have not done the work to build enough housing for the people that having that kind of economic growth attracts. And, that is a better problem to have than the alternative, which is a collapsing state with a collapsing economy. But there is still downsides that can come with that success if you don't plan for it ahead of time. And I think what we need to do in particular when it comes to that issue is we need to highlight things like the Austin City Council, who have done incredible work on a housing reform, on permitting reform and zoning reform, where they have actually seen so much housing getting built there that their rents on average have gone down from last I checked they've gone down about 20% in the past year and a half or so. And that is while inflation has continued going up, mind you. So that may be closer to 30%. That is very remarkable, but not enough people are talking about that at all right now. And we need to be talking about like, oh, if we're doing something on prescription drugs, telling people about it. And then I also think, lastly, I think we got to do a better job in our party of knowing how to talk to people who don't agree with us. And as you can imagine, I've talked to many people who don't agree with me, both voluntarily and not, because the issue of gun control is just, only slightly controversial in this country. And that's why when I was in college, I joined the shooting club. It's not because I was the best person there, although I was one of the best shots on the team. I was one of the only people on the team that didn't wear glasses, so that helps. But it's because I wanted to talk to people who didn't agree with me. And what I realized from those conversations is so often, even if in a poll somebody will say that they don't agree with what Democrats believe, if you actually get to know that person and work to, do some deep canvassing with them, get to know them, have them see you as a friend, see you as a human being, you may not be able to get them fully convinced of everything, but if you can get them to fight less hard against you, that's still progress. And it gives them the opportunity to be willing to change their mind in the future. And I think in our party in particular, we have a lot of work to do within our own families and communities to have those tough conversations and realize that this mentality that I've heard for some reason over the past 5 years or so, that it's not my job to educate you. It is your fucking job to educate people if you're in politics. And if you don't want to do that, that's okay. You should not be in politics then. I hope you still vote, but your job is to live in that uncomfortable reality where people do disagree with you and you acknowledge it and you work to change it instead of living in a comfortable delusion where we continue to lose over and over and over again. So I think it comes down, one, to being less judgmental as a party and realizing that talking to somebody who doesn't agree with you and not calling them names doesn't mean that you're agreeing with them or that you're compromising your values. It's that when they go low and they're calling you names or they're saying something really insulting. Like, for example, I have people that come to me that say that the shooting at my high school didn't happen. Of course, my response to that, a lot of the time, historically when I was younger, was to go scream at them and say like all, call them a bunch of names and cuss them out and other things like that. Am I justified in doing that? Absolutely. Am I going to make progress doing that? No, I'm not. So what I started doing several years ago was I started saying, look, I can respect that you don't agree with me. And although I think your opinion is obviously wrong and offensive, I know that you probably, even if you don't think the shooting at my high school was real, I know that you don't want school shootings to continue in general, right? And when I respond to that person in that way, with that, even that basic level of respect, it shatters their reality. It shatters their reality because it breaks the in-group, out-group mentality that they need to hate somebody that much. And what's so rewarding to me is through every one of the conversations that I've had like that, even with people at times who've denied the shooting at my high school happened, I've had them through the series of conversations I've had with them come back to me months later and eventually say to me, actually, David, I was wrong. And I'm sorry that I ever said that. And I actually agree with you now. And that feeling of making that person feel, one, like an asshole because of what they said without me saying anything, and two, changing their mind is infinitely more gratifying than calling them names or being judgmental or looking down at them or doing anything like that, even though it might feel good. And I think those are the two things that we really got to do. We got to advertise what the hell we're doing a lot more. And not that doesn't mean everything. Frankly, some of the policies that we're passing are not that sexy, even if they are very important. We got to find the best of the best policies that we're passing and just constantly hammer that message of this is what we did to help in this state. This is what we're doing to help people in Colorado. This is what we're doing here. And in our one-on-one conversations with friends and family, making sure that we have the maturity and emotional control to have those difficult conversations, realizing that when they go low, we don't go low, we get smart.
I like that. I like that a lot. Shad, do you want to add anything?
No, briefly, I think David is right on. I think to add on to the lack of judgment and to meet people where they're at, I think I liken this to a relationship sometimes, where if your partner's having a bad day and you had a good day, the solution to making them feel better is not to talk about how great the day actually was. It's to understand how they're feeling and why and listen. And I think that's a big mistake we made in the last election year, is we were so proud of our success, which we should be. We do have the data to prove it. People weren't feeling it. And I think that, we can talk about this in retrospect as perhaps we made a mistake, but we deserve to lose again unless we address this tendency in our party to be defensive. And so I think that we need to go back to the old adage of feeling more than just wanting to be right. It is not enough to be right in this political climate. People know, they just need to know that we care about them and that we're responsive to their issues. And until we fix that cultural tendency in our movement, I think we're going to continue to struggle to find the message that I see a lot of people hoping for in the chat and that we're having a long conversation about here. But I think the first step to a lot of this is acknowledgement. And that's why I think it's really great to have folks like David in leadership and Ken Martin, our new DNC chair. This is something that we seem to have collective agreement around and understanding about. And it's our job over the coming months to be able to answer it. And that's going to be our big challenge. So we're going to need everyone's ideas to do that.
There's a question in the chat too about postcards. I want to address this because there's a lot of people that do postcards. Folks, I gotta say, I think that is if that is the first step of how you get involved or get other people to be involved, and that is the only way that you can be involved. Maybe if some of our friends are disabled and they physically cannot knock doors, or it's just, for whatever. If it's one of those, like aside from a physical or mental disability that stops you from going and knocking doors, I want you out there knocking doors. Like postcarding, Republicans, they're going out there and they're knocking and they are educating people and they're having those difficult conversations. We got to have courage as Democrats to go and have those uncomfortable conversations, or else somebody else is going to have them for us. And I know this may make some people unhappy, but we really, 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 really need people. I would much rather have you knock 5 doors than write 50 postcards. Even 1 door, to be honest with you, and have one conversation for 20 minutes with someone. That will have far more of an impact, in my opinion. And or get involved, get as involved as you can in your local party. We have to, I know this might sound weird, but like we need to build community events that young people want to participate in our party. right? I don't get me wrong. I love people that are older too. They're an integral part of our party. They're very important, but we got to have an intergenerational coalition here. And if you're in a room and you look around and you don't see anybody under the age of 50, I need you all to ask yourselves why that is and what we're going to do to change it so that you can leave that door open and not just hold it open, but get a crowbar and take the door off the damn hinges so there isn't a door in the first place. And that people actually want to come in because it's exciting and cool and fun to be a Democrat. This work is really depressing. It's very hard. We're in a very dark time in our country. But I will tell you a lesson that I've learned from my experience working on gun safety. As you can imagine, working around responding to kids that have gone through school shootings is incredibly hard and taxing emotional work. Anybody who has experienced gun violence or gun suicide or knows somebody who's gone through that knows this is very deeply hard and emotional work. One of the most important lessons that I had to learn in the gun safety movement was that having fun with your friends and your fellow organizers, even other survivors, is not antithetical to success. It is an integral part of it. Republicans need us to be depressed and hopeless to be able to succeed, to be able to act like this is a mandate. The way that you can combat loneliness is by creating events that people want to participate in that have community, where people are able to weather these times together and not feel isolated and not feel alone. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of you all having that community and making sure that you aren't just around each other when it's something super political, which I know is ironic of me to say on this call, but because if you do, the reality is in politics, you can do everything right and still fail. And what will happen is if you do not give your mind positive things to associate each other with outside of this work, you're going to come to hate each other, even if you are doing everything right. You kind of have to Pavlov yourself into liking each other. So go and have a meal together, right? Like everybody's got to eat. Go and have a meal together. Go and do some of these basic things and take a moment to also not talk about politics. That is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I like that, Pavlog yourself into it. That's good. Kind of around something a little different and kind of move the conversation a little bit away from messaging. There's been some, I've been doing a lot of reading and trying to prepare for chat with you guys. And I've seen a couple of different areas where people are saying everything's being blown up right now. And we should maybe look at this as an opportunity to take that and not just let it keep going into chaos and blowing up, but using it as an opportunity for us as a party to reform, rejuvenate, and then also to rethink potentially the way our institutions are. You know, most of these institutions that are getting blown up right now, although they do a lot of good, were created, 180, 60 years ago and aren't in the 21st century at all. So if we're trying to put a positive spin on it, then I think that's something that would be, we take that as let's go, right? Let's get excited about this. Do you guys have ideas about that? And Shad, I'll let you go with this first. Like
Sure.
how we could frame that and what that frame would look like.
This is a really good question. And actually, I'd encourage everyone to check out the great profile on Jason Crow. That was in the New York Times today. He and I have had a few conversations about this, and he speaks at length in this profile about the Democratic Party being the party of reform. And we have suddenly become the party of the status quo. We've suddenly become the party of war and conflict overseas and of representing the elites. Now, none of us know that, we know that's not true. But the perception of the Democratic Party has to be reality if we're going to be able to confront and change it. And so a great example of this is a lot of you know that I run a ranch out west, and we are expanding our business and trying to make it so that we can expand from our beef cattle operation to host events like weddings and corporate retreats. We have a wonderful Eagle County Commission board of Democrats, but over the years, not any one Democrat's fault, but over years and years of Democratic control in the county, we've created an incredibly onerous set of regulations for any small business to get approved and actually innovate and hopefully give people a great experience in the mountains. We've done this in cities like David was talking about with housing, where we've let a lot of not in my backyard type mentality guide our policy decisions from a progressive angle. And I think that if we're going to continue to defend the status quo and people are saying that they're not happy with the status quo, we probably shouldn't expect to be able to win elections much more in the future. So I think we need to be unafraid to challenge ourselves. Your chair, Ben Cohen, and I just went through the grueling experience of running a vacancy committee, which, David, I won't bore you the details with, but everybody on this call knows that these are small groups of Democrats or Republicans that fill the vacancy for folks when they either pass away or resign. And we're challenging ourselves because the public has caught on to this, and it's a good system and it's democratic and it's better than other states where a governor might just pick a replacement. We actually have elections that help choose people still. But the public has grown concerned with it. And rather than defend that, we should try and reform it in ways that respond to the public's concerns and be unafraid to respond to these types of issues that they bring to us. So if we can scale that up to things like Social Security and Medicaid to make sure that the wealthiest aren't getting big handouts and that working people are getting a bigger share of the pie, that's a great way to talk about reform on these, institutions that we defend, but we also want to make sure they're going to the people who need them the most. And so that's, I think, a perspective that we can do two things, hopefully at once.
Wonderful. Thanks, Shad. David, what's your thought on the opportunity to start anew?
It's been needed for a long time. Look, I am not a fan of how Doge thinks about efficiency, but I think there is a lot of appeal there that every American feels of wanting a more efficient government. This speaks to one thing that I mentioned earlier, though, which is the fact that we have failed fundamentally at communicating how we've made government more efficient, right? Biden's inspector generals saved us billions of dollars and recovered that money for us. And I don't know if any of you saw there was a whole, I think it was the New York Times that did like a whole op-ed video of a lot of these like different IGs that saved us billions and billions and billions of dollars. In one case, there was like a soap dispenser that cost like $40,000 that was going on C-17s or something ridiculous. It was like a 7,000% markup. We have not done a good enough job of talking about this. And what's really interesting about this whole Doge experience that they've done is they've looked everywhere to try to find massive waste. And the biggest waste that they found was their own accounting error, where they thought that ICE had an $8 billion contract when they're an $8 billion agency, right? Or something like that, when really it was an $8 million contract. And I think if anything, the experience of Doge and having Elon Musk, who like, you know, has this whole team of people that are going out there that are looking for all this stuff. Like they're working every day to try to find it. The fact they've not found that much beyond what they have, saving $2 billion out of trillions, I think gives us like an A plus at how efficient our government has been. It's not to say there isn't stuff that we need to do. There's a lot of conversations we need to have, in particular around fossil fuel subsidies, for one, of which we give $3 billion away every year to an industry that is making that much. That's right. If we ended fossil fuel subsidies, we would save more money than Elon Musk has already saved us, which was $2 billion plus another billion if we just did that. But we're not going to do that because there's corporations that need it. And there's a whole conversation that needs to be had too about the inefficiencies in the military industrial complex and the fact that any military program in our country right now will not get defunded because even if it is massively overrun in expenses, because every congressional district has like a couple thousand jobs related to that fighter jet or whatever it might be spread out to it. And it's made a really inefficient system of doing welfare to produce guns, bombs, and other forms of arms that is costing us an enormous amount for not that much of a return, to be honest with you, because of all the consolidation that's happened. If you want to talk about efficiency, we got to talk about the revolving door in the Pentagon, right? Of all these officials that then they stay around the same 5-mile radius in DC, where they then go and work at a defense contractor after they've been at the Pentagon or they're on a board. I also think we got to talk about stock trading in Congress. I personally don't think members of Congress should even be allowed to own stock, personally. But I think at the same time, we need to raise their pay. The fact that they're paid as much as they are, I know it sounds like a lot. They got to have 2 residences, and they're on the road constantly too. I personally would much rather have a system of government where they're paid you know, $500,000 a year, but we have incredibly strong ethics codes. And we also say, like, you're not going to own any stocks or have any conflicts of interest here. And if you do violate that, you're going to go to prison for a very long time. That's what I would prefer to help cut down on that efficiency. And also, there should be rules about not working for defense contractors after you've served for the US government. That's a whole nother conversation to be had. But yeah, there is a real need to have a conversation around efficiency and making sure that we're protecting the environment, but also realizing that if our efforts, for example, in California, they have this law called CEQA that I would argue is so strict, it actually has been worse for the environment than it has been good for it. Because what happens is in California, anytime somebody wants to build an apartment complex, it gets sued into oblivion a million times under different environmental rules. And then the response is to lower the number of units that are available there until it's basically just a couple McMansions that are available, which ultimately is way worse for the environment than having that apartment complex in the first place, because then you're forcing people to grow horizontally rather than vertically. And it's also just making our communities more isolated, more car dependent, and more alone, which I think is part of what's driving this around the country right now. But yes, we need to embrace the fact that we need more efficiency in our government, but that efficiency should be geared against fighting against corrupt billionaires like Elon Musk and corrupt corporations that are actively harming people, not harming the most marginalized, and saying that people that live off of veterans benefits like my father did while he was still alive, or people that live off of Social Security because they're disabled or they're elderly, that they're parasites, when there's a man running our government right now that has gotten over $25 billion in tax cuts and subsidies and contracts that we have paid for as the 99%.
Yep. Yeah. Well, I think too, if we address that, if we just go back to our democratic values of justice, equality, solidarity, accountability, like you're talking about, and that's for everybody, and not get stuck in traps of, well, we're fighting for this group or we're trying to protect that group. We're all in this group of Democrats and people who care about other people, right? That's another distinction, I think, between us and the rest. But we can't continue to keep defending the status quo. And so if we jump on board of this opportunity of these changes that are happening, not willfully, but change is never easy, and figure out ways to be more successful in implementing these changes, I think that'll serve our party better, it'll serve our people better, or it'll serve our whole country better. So I like all of those ideas. I kind of, again, a little bit of a shift here. I can't remember who, I tried to write down everybody that I read this thing from, but there was somebody who was saying that there's basically three constituencies of Democrats. There's the base, okay, and there's a kind of a third. So there's just the base, then there's donors, and the donors really want government to work, and so does most of the base. And then there's elite opinion havers and leaders and grassroots leaders and columnists, et cetera, that want us to be louder. And I feel like right now that last third of wanting us to be louder is infiltrating the base. And I think the donor party too, because maybe not the high-end donor party, but as far as local donors are, so I think that if, do you guys see a division like that? And it's not so much of a division as just a category of how the Democrats in general are.
I think something you said there that has been really striking to me since the outcome of the election is in Colorado, like we talked about earlier, we did really well. And it was against pretty big odds and we had some heartbreaks. But the frustration from everyone has been real. And I've felt it too. I'm just as frustrated as you guys are day to day. And it's actually interesting because the donor class, which is kind of used sometimes as a bad word, we have some of the best campaign finance laws in the country. It also has some of the lowest campaign finance limits in the country. And so in a lot of ways, compared to the amount of money other states pull in from a single donor, Colorado is really truly a grassroots operation from the ground up. And so the donors here share a lot of the same frustrations that you all have around wanting to see a fight, wanting to make sure that we're effective. I think it really speaks to to an overwhelming sense that I think has been confirmed by polling as recently as this week that that says people don't necessarily want us to go to DC to help the Republicans pass less bad policy. They want us to go there and kick and scream and make sure that we're sticking up for people. And that's what I'm hearing from donors. That's what I'm hearing from grassroots activists alike. And it's the first time I've sort of heard a unified message from those two different sets of our coalition. And that says to me that we need to heed that call. Now, of course, we need to do so in a way that is strategic and helps us win campaigns and offers a positive vision for the future at the same time. But like David said, if we're fighting on C-SPAN and they're doing WrestleMania, we need to give, a couple rock bottoms and a stone cold stunner here and there to make sure that folks are paying attention and can understand what we're trying to fight against as much as we're trying to fight for.
Yep, I would agree with all of that, Chad. David, do you have a comment?
Okay, can you repeat the three segments that you were talking about?
It's like, so there's just kind of the base, people would just always vote Democratic, donors, and the donors and the base both want government to work, but they're kind of segregated out. And then the third one is grassroots leaders, opinion writers, columnists, so that's that other third group where, and it could be people like TikTok influencers, whoever, that have more of a say. And that third party or that third section is really gaming for the fight, right? I mean, and I'm going to put myself in there, not that I'm an influencer or any of that, but I have not been as pissed as I was last Friday when I was standing in line to go see a movie at Biff called Zareski versus Texas about abortion rights. Then, since everything has happened. So I'm just wondering if from your perspective, if you're seeing that kind of segregation among those three groups. So base, donors, and grassroots leaders kind of thing.
Yeah, look, the good news is, one, we're not losing because we can't raise money. That is, don't stop donating. To be clear, we need to support the Colorado Democratic Party, and I'm going to advocate everything I can to make sure we get more funding from the DNC to our state parties. But I think one of the bigger issues that we have, and this isn't just the party, this is life too in general. It's so much easier to talk about what's wrong, right? To say everything like, oh my God, everything sucks, everyone sucks, this and that, and just say what's wrong than it is to actually talk about how you're going to make it better. But even more than that, it's not enough to have a good idea. You got to have the skills of persuasion and the power to actually implement that idea. And what that's going to require in our party is people standing up and being part of the change that they want to see a lot more rather than waiting somebody to make it for them. That's why I ran for this role. It's not because, I was like, you know what I want to do? I want to take on a part-time job that is unpaid, like many of our state party chairs, that is effectively a full-time job. It's because I know that in order for me to help lead our party, to help get stronger gun laws, to address the root causes of gun violence that so much of our party is geared towards addressing, whether it's poverty, whether it's the mental health system or other things like that, I had to step up and be part of that change in that moment. And that is always going to be infinitely harder. But what I would ask of everybody on this call to do is to be part of that. Be part of that change. Step up, try to run for something in your local party. Run for something in your state party. Run for local office. Run in a deeply red area. Run in a purple area. Run wherever you can to be part of that change. And look, there's a lot of work that we got to do across the board in our party. We are far from perfect, and that goes from our elected officials as well. We got a lot of work to do, and I am all for us having the strongest party that we possibly can. So if you see a problem, step up and be part of the solution. Don't just stand on the sidelines and complain about it. If you have the potential, if you have the privilege of being able to do something about it, do it. Because this is not going to change just by us talking about what's wrong here. And I get the frustrations too. I do. I get especially frustrated with the consultants who we talk so much about, but we rarely name. I have started naming some of them myself, publicly. because I am tired of us talking about all these consultants that suck and not naming names. This is not going to change until we start publicly shaming them and calling them out for their ridiculous behavior. I've even had consultants that have threatened to get candidates in or threatened to primary candidates that we've supported with leaders we deserve if they didn't hire them as a form of extortion, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
That is insane. People like that need to be called out. And we also need to do a better job as a party, from the DNC, from the D trip, from the DS to the DLCC to everybody, of communicating as much as possible when you are running for office, whether it's a local office, a state office, or a national office, communicating very, very clearly these are the standard rates of what you should be paying for TV, of what you should be paying for mail, of what you should be paying for digital, of what you should be paying a fundraising consultant. And, and here's the range, here's the median of what we suggest. This is 5% above, this is 5% below. Anything that is higher than 5% above this is highly suspect, and you should immediately call this person at the party to question whether or not this is like a good deal that you are getting or not. Because so often I see people get ripped off and it really pisses me off because I'm a small dollar donor to our party. I'm a small dollar donor to the Democratic Party in DC. And by the way, please, if you are not, I'm not just a small dollar donor, I am a reoccurring small dollar donor. If you can, please be a recurring donor to the Colorado Democratic Party and the DNC, please.
Yes.
But I feel that. I see the messaging, and that's why when I do my fundraising emails and things like that, you're never going to see giant red letters saying the world's going to end if you don't give me money right now, because I think that actually makes Donald Trump look a lot stronger than he actually is, right? Because we're fear-mongering about him constantly, and he is doing wrong things and bad things. I think more than anything, though, we got to make fun of him in an accurate way, because that's really what gets to him more than anything, because it makes him look weak, and it's also one of the few emotions you can't really fake that as easily, which is laughter. And it also feels good to laugh at somebody like him because it makes it less intimidating. Um, but yeah, we got a lot of work to do in how we treat our small dollar donors, and I take it very, very seriously. And realizing that, if you can't give money, you still have value in this party. I want to figure out, though, in this role as vice chair, what does that look like beyond phone banking? I'm very thankful to the people who do that. We got to get off the phones too, though, and we got to get on the doors. And we also got to have a better message on the doors too, and be having that conversation multiple times instead of just one time, hundreds of miles away from where we live, or even thousands of miles.
I absolutely agree with you 1,000% about getting off the phones and on the doors. I did both at the end to get out the vote, and the phones were so brutal, and our people are hanging up on us because they've been called 10 times in the last week, and they've already said yes, but it's different, groups. So I also like how you mentioned we've got to have intersection or, intercommunication between all of our different groups so that we're, again, not hitting at the same people constantly. We can be more efficient, et cetera. And I think your idea about making sure that there's a high and a low and, your median rate where you should be for consultants I think that's a fantastic idea. Those are the kinds of things that maybe aren't happening, but would be helpful to so many people, especially down ballot races. So we've got about 7 minutes left. I want to bring up one other topic that was raised about the gender gap, especially in your generation, David. It's pretty bad. I was on a call today, and they were saying there's at least 23 points. And because you guys don't necessarily answer phones for polls, it could be higher. Their comments were, there's like the manosphere, and then there's the women's sphere, where that's, on social media, it's like all this women's stuff, and then there's all this men's stuff. What do you think? How do we bridge that gap?
Well, one, I think there's some important context here. This is not just an issue with the Democratic Party. This is gender polarization is something that is happening around the world right now. In every developed country, pretty much, including countries that are not even Anglophone countries, there is pretty significant gender polarization that is happening. It was happening before COVID, and I think what happened is it was severely exacerbated by COVID. A lot of the societal trends that we have had of our society as we transitioned away from being a heavy industries based economy And a lot of our jobs have been automated in industry that historically were more union centered and paid a lot. As we transition more away from that through offshoring and automation, we've transitioned to a service-based economy. A lot of those roles are less masculine. They are less well-paying. And what we've seen too is since the passage of Title IX, young men used to get bachelor's degrees at a rate 15% higher than women. Young men are now getting bachelor's degrees at a rate 15% less than women. And there's a really sad phenomenon that happens that a lot of sociologists talk about called male flight, where as a institution has more women that are involved in it, it becomes seen as more feminine, and it actually creates a positive feedback loop where less men go to it, and then because less men go to college, for example, then more women go, and it's seen as more and more and more and more effeminate, and then it reinforces their own insecurities because then they're not going to get a job that is as high paying, right? And then that makes them feel even more insecure because they can't be a provider nearly as much as they believe that they should be able to, and they take that personally on themselves, even though it's because they didn't go to college. They didn't get that higher degree of education, so they're not able to get that higher paying job. And I think what we really need to do here in the Democratic Party, in my view, and how we win these young men back, is one, we need to make sure that they understand that we care about them in the first place. I think a first step of doing that is the fact that during the election, if you went to the DNC's website, Democrats.org, and you looked at it, there's this section. It says, "What are we doing? What do we do for you?" essentially, and then you click it, and it says like for women, for Hispanic people, for Black people, for LGBT people, for immigrants, for this, for that. Nowhere, out of dozens of these groups, nowhere did it say men at all. And I think for too long, our party has had a mentality of believing that caring about men means that it is to the detriment and exclusion of women. I understand why there is that mentality. I am here to tell you, as one of the last remaining young men in our party, frankly, some senses demographically speaking, we got to end that mentality. It doesn't mean that we should be going out there and saying like, this is our agenda for young men. That is not what I'm saying. I feel that will come off as pandering and just wrong. We just got to talk about the issues that matter to young men, right? And I think we got to show too how we are Democrats. We are the party of fucking science and building shit, right? Tap into the little boy in every man, basically. Like we like bullet trains. We like building shit. We like housing. We like really cool, safe cities that are the cities of the future, that are clean, safe, and efficient, where you can start a business, right? We need to also make sure that, and this may be more of a, I don't know if this is actually something that should happen necessarily, but I think within our party infrastructure, we should be figuring out too, how can our state and local parties have a service-based element that part of it can be a mentorship program for younger men about like, here, we'll connect you to the business community to get a mentor, or here's how you can get a job on Chad's ranch, or here's how you can, I don't know if you're hiring right now, Chad, but here's how you can do all these different things and provide them something more than just being like, we just need your vote. It's like, oh, actually, we're a pipeline where you can get a lot of resources and help and support, and we're not just going to be in your community when it's an election. I think with that too, we got to become less judgmental. I think that there's a lot of young men that voted for Donald Trump not because they agree with him, but because they feel like at least he doesn't hate them. And I feel like there's a lot of young men that right now feel like our party does not like them. In part because I have heard in conversations, frankly, from people within our own party, even if it's jokingly, saying how much like they hate men. And I kind of get that. We're not perfect by any means. I'm not happy with myself all the time, but that type of message is really harmful. And I think that we got to show a positive example of what masculinity looks like. And I know that's ironic of me to say, considering I'm basically two-dimensional. But we have to show that one, there are multiple pathways to success in our country to the American dream. Two, that we're rebuilding the American dream and genuinely doing it and changing people's lives doing it. Even if you don't want to go to college, you should still be able to succeed in America. And I think that's something that we really need to promote a lot more. And it might look like going to vocational school. It might look like being an entrepreneur. It might look like, something else. But emphasizing that that is okay and providing state-supported programs that specifically help with that. And with that too, I think just being more competent. I think a lot of people just see us as incompetent in general, as ineffective and incompetent. And they see us as weak. And the reason, part of the, like, if you ask people in a focus group at the Democratic Party who's an animal, you know what the most common answer is? You want to take a guess, Shad? He's so stunned he can't speak.
Yeah.
It's a turtle.
Oh,
Oh
right when I
God,
unmuted.
no, that's what's his name?
I was gonna say a giraffe.
That's McConnell.
It's a turtle. You know what it is for Republicans?
Oh,
A
lion.
shark or a lion. Tell me which one of those you think is going to be more appealing to young men, right? And people want fighters. I think even if they don't agree with somebody, they want somebody who fights for them. And also, I think the reason why so many young men voted for Donald Trump is because they feel like the system is not working. It is not working. And I think that goes across the board for a lot of people, not just young men. We saw the largest gains that Trump made with predominantly younger people and people of color. And that is not a testament to his good messaging. It's a testament to our failure to deliver for them and communicate what we are doing for them in a way that isn't very pandering. I personally don't think that our message to those voters should be, this is what we're doing for this demographic. This is our plan for this demographic. This is our plan for this demographic. It comes off as pandering and weird, right? I think we need to, internally in our campaign communications, we need to be like, well, we need to have a specific plan for Black men, Black women, for Latino men, for this and this and this. But in our actual communications to voters, it needs to be without any of that language. It just needs to be issues based. This is what we're doing for you. This is how we're delivering, and showing them that we are effective and we are competent. And I think our party, frankly, too, if there is somebody who is really uh, messing up and not doing a good job, I think this is my own opinion personally here. There needs to be more of an embrace of primaries too. We are the Democratic Party, and there's a taboo around that, and I understand to some extent why that is, but at the same time, I do think that we need to have an embrace that people should have a chance to make their voice heard, and that means running in Democratic primaries too. And I know that's controversial. I know not everybody will agree with that, but I think especially in some of our blue states, that is a lot of what is going to be needed to be able. And I don't want people primarying people in competitive races, to be clear. I don't want that. To be clear, do not do that. But we need to make sure that our own party is holding itself accountable to our values and making sure that we are as competent as possible. And that's how I think that we win back our young men. We also gonna need to have a way bigger presence on YouTube and TikTok and podcast and everything like that more. And not be afraid to have conversations with people like Joe Rogan.
Right. Wonderful. Shad, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that was spot on. And I mean, I think that the sense that we are high up in the clouds and why I thought it was going to be a giraffe is because I think that we are just not on the ground speaking about the issues that they care about. But a turtle is even more appropriate. We're slow, we're lethargic. You look around our leadership, and it's people who have served wonderfully for decades and decades. And there's a role for those folks. But opening the doors to more people, I think you're going to start to see a different type of candidate emerge when you start seeing people David's age being allowed to run for office in some of these seats. I'm a pretend young person at the age of 37, but I still, there's not a millennial out there that doesn't feel betrayed by older generations, not because anybody was a bad person, but because we failed to deliver in ways that are really meaningfully impacting our lives. And there are only so many election cycles where we can run on the Affordable Care Act, which was a monumental shift in the way that we serve people. And that's the type of spirit that I think we need. I challenge anyone to go back to a Barack Obama speech from 2007. He was not a safe speaker. You take away the sexism, the nihilism, the gross homophobia, everything that's terrible about Donald Trump. And he and Barack Obama actually sound startlingly similar during those early days of Obama's campaign. And if you guys remember that energy, we all needed to feel that somebody actually understood our anger at George W. Bush and the Republicans who were trying to give away Social Security. These are not new things we have to learn. These are habits that we used to have, and we just need to be able to kickstart them and make sure that we're going back to what has worked in the past, which has been this righteous frustration with the status quo.
Yeah.
There's a part of the demographic that hasn't felt that.
So we are a little bit past time, so I'm gonna stop here, but I'm gonna ask one more question, real quick answer, and if you don't know, you don't know, but Who's our leader right now? And if not, if there isn't one, who should it be? Or who would you want to see it be?
Well, we are through, I mean, I think that we're still searching for that type of Barack Obama type figure that might rally everyone around a unified message. But I think, David, I don't want to uh, let people walk away from this call not feeling confidence in Ken Martin. I think that he's doing an incredible job of shifting our messaging to be more aggressive. He's organizing everywhere. We just worked with him today to launch a billboard in Gabe Evans district, but we're also hosting town halls and we're also putting together a robust organizing platform. We're also working closely to make sure that we're in every digital social media channel that we can be. And these are things that are new and fresh and feel very different from even just a couple of years ago, with all respect to Jamie Harrison, who we love too. So Ken Martin is our leader right now. And I think we are all responsible. Everyone on this call is a leader responsible for laying the groundwork for our next presidential candidate to emerge and really shake up the system and be able to build a big coalition. But I think that you look at people like AOC, you look at this, our very own Jonah Goose. We have some incredible representation here in Colorado that's shaking it up. You look at Brittany Pedersen, who's sticking up for working mothers day in and day out and resonating with the issues that people actually care about. And so each one of us is a leader in our own regards. And if we wait for a hero to come save us, we're going to be sorely disappointed. I think the heroes right now are in the mirror.
Agreed. David, any thoughts? I think what happens is when one of you is talking, the other one gets muted.
Yeah, I mean, look, I know that in the chairs race, it was obviously very competitive. And I got a lot of texts afterwards from people. But like the reality is I have known Ken Martin for quite a bit now. I've been involved in politics for 7 years or so at this point. I got to know Ken especially well last year after I was a pretty fierce advocate on social media for a certain vice presidential pick. But what I will say about Ken is, regardless of whether or not you know him, I like him. I think he's very competent. I think he's a hard worker, and he knows how to put his head down and do the work. Give him a chance. There's a lot, as you can imagine, to deal with when you're the chair of the Democratic Party in this moment. But he is going around the country. He's going and knocking doors. He's in Wisconsin. He's going all over the place to help rally our party. And I think he is one of our leaders right now. And then I think with that too, I also look at some of our younger leaders around the country. I look at people like Jeff Jackson, right, in North Carolina. I look at people like AOC. I look at people like Congressman Maxwell Frost. I look at some of our local leaders too. Even people like Kirk Watson, the mayor of Austin, Texas, Melvin Carter, the mayor of St. Paul, Minnesota. There's, Justin Bibb in Cleveland, and the mayor of Baltimore, and so many others that are doing really incredible work around the country on housing and gun violence that is not being covered very much, because you're not going to hear about the person who's not homeless because of the housing that we actually did build. You're not going to hear about the person who doesn't get shot because of the program that we did fund, right? But we do see in the data that we're having a very big impact on gun violence. And I think that's ultimately what makes me hopeful is our local leaders are really stepping up right now around the country. Our municipal officials are stepping up. And our party is stepping up too. I think
Yeah.
that there's a lot of really needed conversations that are happening at the moment. But what I will say too is in our party, in particular at the DNC, there's a lot of work that we need to do to make it more economically accessible for people. In my run, the demographics that we lost most this past election were some of the ones that struggled the most to show up and participate as members of the DNC, because they also are volunteers and they have to
Right.
pay for their travel. And that's for me, that's a little crazy, because it literally, as a nerd, I love reading through bylaws, and it says right here in section 11 of part 2 of section B in the bylaws on page 19, that national and democratic state parties have to carry out programs to facilitate and increase the participation of low income and moderate persons. These programs shall include provisions for the resources for the outreach and recruitment to achieve a representation equitably and minimize economic factors which act to bar full participation by such persons. It's literally in our bylaws that we need to help people have accessibility to organizations like the DNC that are already part of it. But the reality is they can't be if they literally cannot afford to be at the table. So I think in our
Right.
own, we got a lot of work to do to help win back the working class. And I think that's part of what we have to do is figure out how we do that within our own party too.
I absolutely agree with that. And I will stop it here and say thank you so very much. I actually did not know that you were also volunteer. So
I am.
very much
I
appreciated
am.
for that. So a lot of people on this call are very familiar with the volunteer work. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It was very enlightening. It is also extremely inspiring to have someone in your capacity and at your age to come in and be able to help us know and learn and to be able to support you as well. And Shad, congratulations on your second chairmanship. We're really happy to have you because you're extremely good at it. I also am going to pitch that you become monthly donors to the Colorado Democratic Party, to the Boulder County Democratic Party, and the DNC. Just so you know, right now, the Republican, the equivalent, the RNC, is got 310 million, and we only have 137, or we're 137 below that. So we need to do some catching up. I'm a first-time recurring donor to the DNC now. I've not been before. I'm very excited about the slate of officers there. I think because you said you guys are all organizers and been on the ground, that we are going to see a big shift. And to remember, everybody on this call, you're part of that shift too. So get involved with your precinct, renew your membership here, become recurring donors. Even if it's $5 a month to each one of those three, the reliability of those coming in regularly is very, very helpful to those organizations. Last thing is Joe Nagoose is having a town hall at Monarch High School at 2:00 on Saturday. Bernie and AOC are going to be here on Friday in Greeley at, I think, 1, and Denver at 5. There's already over 25,000 signups for the Denver rally with Bernie and AOC. And I think that was everything that I had, other than we'll be in person next month in April. David, you're welcome anytime you want to come visit Boulder. We can find you a place to stay and would love to show you around. Do you guys want to say any parting words?
Sorry for reading you guys the bylaws at the end of this.
No problem. I'm a bylaw nerd too.
I'll just say thank you. Everybody on this call does so much for us to help win big elections, and not just in Boulder. You guys travel and you go do hard work. We're going to need you guys to do it again. You can't win the state unless Boulder County wins out. So you guys allow us to go into the rural and red areas and hopefully change community by community and in part the world. So thank you for everything you're doing. We're building some really exciting programs here, both big and small, in our second term that I think you're all going to be really excited about. So keep an eye out. And public tickets for the Obama Gala on May 31st went on sale today. It'll be with Elizabeth Warren. She's coming to give us some rallying words, so visit coloradodems.org to get your tickets there. And before the event, we'll also have a free day-long festival called DemFest to celebrate young folks in our party and the labor movement. I know I've talked to David about it. Hopefully we'll be able to get him out there. We're also working with Anderson Clayton from North Carolina and possibly Ken Martin himself. So it's going to be a great day of free program for folks to come and network and be together. So thank you for everything you're doing, and just a privilege to be your chair.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you all.
Wonderful event. So appreciative. Take care and good luck.